I think it'd be fair to say that men today are feeling more pressures than ever from lots of different directions. It can be pressures of family life, pressures in relationships, pressures at work, pressure over finances. I'd also think pressure over expectations that we put on ourselves can be really, really big as well. And I do think the conversation is changing. Men are beginning to talk a little bit more and open up a little bit more, but there is still a long, long way to travel. And this, of course, is Men's Health Awareness Month. And what we want to do over the next 45 minutes or so is begin to talk about some of the different pressures that we face in life, what those pressures look like, what they feel like, and how we go about recognizing them, but more importantly, how we go about talking about them and then finding practical ways in which to deal with them. We have got a superb panel today. We are joined by Dr Hussain Al-Zubaidi. He is primarily a GP, but he's also Health Partnerships lead at Parkrun, and alongside us we have two English cricketing legends and also Vitality ambassadors in Jos Buttler and Joe Root as well. And what we want to do is hear from each of the guys about the kind of pressures that they face in their different worlds, and also how they go about recognizing them, do they talk about them, and really giving you some very practical takeaways from this about when you feel that pressure, you feel that squeeze in life, you're struggling to really open up about stuff, how you can go about doing that. So guys, really good to see you. Thanks for joining us for this chat. Dr. Hussain, I want to come to you first of all and just tell us why you think we're in a period in life where it feels like men in particular are feeling more pressures than ever. Is it a real thing for you?
Do you know what? Yeah, I think it is. It's always complex when you're looking at trends in terms of health outcomes, and we know that mental health rates among men and women are on the rise. Whether that's because we are better able to detect, people are more likely to maybe present and seek help, or whether there is a reason driving those increased rates. I think there's probably enough evidence there to associate a number of kind of the complexities that we've seen over the last few decades in social media, as well as changes in terms of the structure of communities, families, and individual expectations, to see that on the ground when I'm speaking to men. Often there are similar traits where they feel a little bit lost as to kind of what their identity is and how they feel like they can express themselves. And also there is a real struggle in terms of balancing all the plates, whether it be home life, work life, their own drive and expectations and wants. And that can be really tricky. You know, it's so important that men do consider and reflect on that, because all too often when they come to see someone like me, it's right at the end of that journey. You know, they are very much, you know, whether it's burnt out, struggling with mood, struggling with anxiety, and it'd be great if we can try to intervene a little sooner.
So you're seeing a lot of men kind of getting to crisis point before they're then beginning to seek help, beginning to open up about stuff.
Definitely. And in comparison, when I think about the women that come and approach myself and my colleagues, it tends to be earlier on. Obviously, you see a spectrum, but they tend to seek for support and help earlier on. And there's a lot more that can be done and easier in terms of getting the traction at that point, rather than waiting for things to really sort of spill over.
And Jos and Joe, I mean, we tend to look at guys like you as kind of superhuman. You've got it all sorted. We see you go out there and perform the heroics you so often do. But you're family men, you're fathers, you've got that burden of the financial responsibility, being a dad, being a husband, and also having to go out and perform in an absolute pressure cooker environment where there are so many eyes looking at you, expecting, wanting, hoping that you're going to perform. When you put all of those kind of pressures that we've just been talking together, and in the heightened environment that you perform and you do your work, Jos, for you, what kind of impact can that have on your well-being?
I think for a lot of it, I actually sort of wrongly, as the doctor said, is you try and wait and push it away and sort of take it all upon yourself. I think sometimes you feel like you should know all the answers, or you have to be strong to be a man, and sort of not show any weakness that you are struggling with something, or you're feeling under pressure in a certain aspect of your life, whether it be at home or playing cricket. Certainly felt as when I was captain as well, it was like you couldn't show any, you know, weakness in that sense. Everyone's looking to you for the answers if the pressure comes on, or if, and also when you're captain, you're sort of looking after other guys, their off-field problems as well. So that was a time I found very difficult to open up to anyone to sort of share how I may have been feeling. And now with hindsight, I can honestly say I wish I had talked more openly about what I was feeling and the struggles that I may have been going through, dealing with all those things, that would have actually made me a better captain as well. But I think the society thing about being a man, you know, being that sort of strong person in the house, being the one that sort of, you know, just traditionally the way men and women say should be. I know it's a very changing time in those kind of things, but I think that's probably the biggest thing I've realised is I do that massively. I wait and wait and wait till it gets to a point where I can't cope anymore, and then have to find someone to talk to. But it is probably at the latter end of that time, you know. So if I could actually sometimes get my own ego out the way and just, or fear of embarrassment to say I've got an issue and catch it sooner, it'd probably be much smaller problems or smaller stresses.
And Joe, do you identify with some of that? Because you obviously had that period as captain as well, and you can totally understand what Jos is saying there. You know, you've got to put on that strong face within the dressing room. People are looking to you for leadership, for guidance, for inspiration, whatever you want to say. But you internally are dealing with all of the pressures of that, and the added pressure that, as well as being captain, you are still expected to go out and score the runs with the bat as well. What impact did that have on you?
It weighs you down, for sure. I think everything that Jos says resonates a lot with me. We kind of went through very similar kind of trends throughout our captaincies. And the last thing you want is to come across weak or as if you're not in control of situations, when actually sometimes the most important thing to do is to allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable, ask for help. And I almost feel like the misconception with the word vulnerable is it is seen to be a weakness, but I think it's the first step forward towards solving a problem. If you can let someone else in and you can share how you're feeling, then that is the first step on the road to, you know, solving whatever it is that is the obstacle in front of you. We're constantly used to having to deal with failure, getting things wrong, making mistakes. And if you can't accept that that is going to be part of your life and you're going to have to overcome struggles and overcome difficulties, then it is going to build up on you and it is going to make life difficult to comprehend. But if you can find a way of accepting that not everything's going to be perfect, you're not going to always have the answers, but allowing other people to come in and help you, that can make a significant difference, not only in your own mental space, but, you know, the people around you as well.
And Dr. Hussain, just picking up on something Joe is saying there, because I remember seeing an amazing quote years ago when I was struggling massively with my mental health and with grief as well, is that this guy said about as men that when we're really struggling with things, what we tend to do is kind of clench the fist. It's that whole man up thing. It's a phrase I've hated down the years, but it's still used now. Probably less than it was, but it's still used. But this quote spoke about the power and the strength of unclenching that fist and daring to have those vulnerable moments, because when you have them, you allow other people in, and you can then begin the conversation around, well, how do I get to a better place with this? Do you think that whole thing about manning up that we often see, particularly in the world of sport, understandably, that narrative is beginning to change?
Yeah, I think it's beginning to shift. And I think it's complex as well, because when I speak to patients, I often try to encourage people to think not of vulnerability, but of just a bit of transparency. Because what often happens is people, they work through these really difficult things. They don't tell those around them. And then what happens is those closest to them, where it is their colleagues, teammates, their loved ones, they can misinterpret what they're seeing. So they may think that, you know, the change in behaviour and how they may be reacting short-tempered, whatever that may be, is because of them or because of what they've done. And that can lead to lots of, you know, downstream issues. So what I try to encourage them is, if maybe you don't want to talk just yet, just let people know. Just say, oh, by the way, you know, I'm going through a bit of a difficult thing at the moment, just to be aware. You know, just to hear that, because then they're going to respond differently. Maybe they're not going to, you know, go after you when you're a bit short when you come back in the evening or that kind of thing. So just start off, if you feel like you can't quite get into a proper conversation, just increasing that transparency so that people know what's going on.
And one of the things that, listen, we all do this, men and women in life, is pulling on the old masks. And I think men in particular do it. So, you know, when you guys perform for England, perform for your counties, you're putting on that mask of, I'm a professional cricketer, this is what I do for a job. And when we come back into our home situations, our family situations, we put on another mask as well. And I think I'm sure you probably agree with me, over time that becomes absolutely exhausting, that feeling that when I come back, I've had a bad day at the crease and I've got to come straight back into the family situation, and the wife's had a tough day with the kids, and you've got to be that ever-present dad, and you may be worrying about various different things aside from that. Do you struggle with that, Jos, in terms of those multiple masks you're wearing as a man, in terms of the impact that has on you, both the family man, the husband, but also the cricketer as well?
I think there's times when you struggle with it. I think you mentioned a great quote there about, releasing your fist, but it's almost like sometimes I feel like I'll hear that and it's like, right, that's it, done, I'm fine now. But it's actually a daily thing you have to keep working on. And there'll be days when I find that, putting on your mask and say coming home and being dad and leaving cricket outside very easy. And there'll be other days when I find that actually really difficult and it feels like a burden or a cloud, and you can't quite sort of be present and immerse yourself in your home life. So then when you are with them and it's not sort of quality time or how you wanted it to be, I find that quite hard to deal with as well, because it almost feels like it's on like a ticking clock. It's like
so precious.
I've only got this hour before they go to bed, and I've been out all day and I want this to be brilliant, and it's they might be in a bad mood or upset about something, and I find that quite difficult, because then you sort of go to bed then thinking, well, I only saw them for what's the point, why do I spend all this time away from them? And it's not, and at other times I find the masks helpful. Even cricket sometimes can feel like an escape, and escape's probably the wrong word, isn't it, because that is maybe avoiding how you're feeling, but so I'd say it's like a constant juggling and a bit of a
I doubt there's many people watching this who would define escape as a ball coming down at you at 80 plus miles per hour. But hey,
you can't think about much else then.
No, exactly. Focuses the mind, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Joe, when for you has been those moments where you recognise you're struggling? Because I think that's one of the hard things, I think particularly for guys, is to get to that position of recognising that mentally you're struggling at the moment. Is that something that's been obvious to you at times, or something you've had to learn to recognise?
Definitely something that, like Jos mentioned, it's sort of ever evolving, and it's not something that's sort of come and just gone. I think the one that stands out the most was towards the back end of my captaincy. I just felt like when I was at home, I was sort of there, but I wasn't properly present, as Jos mentioned. And again, you feel guilty for that, but there's not really much you can do, and it almost compounds on it, because you're not what you want to be, and you're not portraying the person that you are inside, and you can not really give each your family or your job what is required of you. So I think once I gave up the captaincy, and it allowed me to be who I am and who I wanted to be, and just feeling what that felt like. Obviously, it was a difficult decision, having done it for such a long period of time and working towards something like that for your whole career. But the amount of enjoyment and the realisation off the back of it, having gone through that experience, and sort of freedom it gave me, and clarity that this is the most important thing to me, was huge, really.
And when you're struggling within that period as captain, in terms of managing all of which you've just said, were there practical things you did during that period to try and help yourself, so that when you came home you could be more present, you could deal with the pressure of being not just an amazing batsman, but the leader of England as well?
Yeah, I feel like that's the frustrating part of it, is you learn so much in hindsight. And I wish I had better tools to manage things, and even if it's just small goals, the stuff that I've done since then is making sure that I feel like I'm extremely prepared going into a lot more of the tours that we go on, or the series that are coming up, so that I can almost leave it at the changing room door, and then I know I've done my work, I know I'm prepared, I know what I need to do.
And that's a really good, important point, because one of the things that I talk about, especially when people present burnout, is how can you do as much prep and homework for all you may not see it as important stuff, but like the life admin. I tell people, like, is the cupboard tidy? Is your computer neat? Is your email sorted?
Yeah.
Because these things all matter, because they're actually relatively easy to try and sort out. You just need to devote a bit of time, and it can feel very difficult when everything's overflowing. But I say, sort all that other stuff out. Make the rest of your environment as kind of arranged and sort of, you know where it is. You don't have to constantly go finding stuff. And that will just buy you that little bit of pressure valve release to allow you to take on those extra challenges. And sometimes it surprises people, but they come back a few months later and go, oh my God, I finally got through the 800 notifications and emails and stuff. And now when I start the day, I don't feel like I'm already at, 100 bar.
And Jos, listen, it's something I guess you get used to, but the reality is, as a professional cricketer, you're going to spend long periods of time away from the family. Mentally, what kind of challenges has that posed down the years?
I'd say guilt is a big word that I struggle with probably the most, is sort of like, I'm getting to, be so lucky to travel the world, play cricket, do amazing things, and sort of live out your childhood dreams. But there's other people who are sacrificing things for you. And I think sometimes just, having the bravery maybe to go, do you know what, I can put cricket second for a bit. I actually remember during COVID going to Owen Morgan and saying, actually, I just want to go home. I don't want to play the next game. I know I have to come back in and do another 3 or 4 days, whatever it is, in a room, but I just need to go home. But I think that's really important, trying to just have a few times where you're like, right, this is our plan, this is how we're going to do it. And it can change, right? It's okay to, get to a point where you say, actually, this isn't working, I just want to step back for a bit. But that's where, does all those stigmas that we have as men, that's when it really challenges that. And I think some of the struggles, sometimes I feel like the most, is when you start to struggle with your own company, because you spend a lot of time in cricket, obviously with a team, but you spend a lot of time on your own as well, in the hotel room or traveling on the bus. So you can be, when you're sort of not enjoying your own company, I find that probably the most difficult time.
And I think sometimes, I know you'd agree, but it's that fear of the reaction. Like if I fess up to right now I'm struggling with something, what is going to be the reaction? How are people going to see me? How am I going to be perceived at work? And I remember when everything kind of car crashed for me in 2017 and anxiety and panic attacks had taken over, and I just couldn't present live football anymore. And my biggest fear was how Sky were going to react. Would this forever put me in a box that I was going to be this person they couldn't trust in front of a camera anymore? And I found it so liberating that actually everything I feared in terms of their reaction was totally the opposite. It was like, how can we support you? How can we get you to a place where we can get you back on air? And it was just so refreshing. And I know that's not, sadly, the case for everybody in their places of work and in life as well. Joe, in terms of when you look back at your cricketing career today, has it felt at times a place where that's been hard? Is it still a place where that's hard? Has it changed? How would you view it now?
I'd say that it's ever evolving, right? But there's certainly been challenging moments where you, like you say, you feel like there isn't really a way out, and actually there's more than one way out if you are willing to search for it and not have to try and deal with it on your own. I look at the squad that we have now, and in terms of dealing with difficult moments, I think the guys that are out there living and breathing everything you do, dealing with the same pressures, having those conversations with them are the best people to talk to most of the time, because they can relate to it. They feel all the same things that you do. So once I sort of got my head around that, and clearly the older you get, the more senior you are within the team, and the more experience you have, the easier it is to manage these certain things. And we also got captain at the minute, Ben Stokes, who's been through all sorts of his own struggles, but the fact that he has been able to be vulnerable and allow help, and it's, if that's coming from the top, that's our leader, the one that everyone wants to follow out there on the field and will do everything they can for. It makes it a little bit easier for the guys underneath to sort of do that.
And I don't know about you, I find that just so refreshing to hear, because you look at Ben Stokes, absolute warrior, but then listening to Joe talking about him there, that is the kind of thing that I guess we want to hear. We want to see that in all areas of society when it comes particularly to men's mental health. What, For you at the moment, Dr. Hussain, when you look at such a broad area, what would you say are the biggest things that are holding men back from being able to have those conversations? We will come on to practical steps, and the guys have talked about some of those already. But what is still holding men back from putting their hands up every now and again saying, do you know, right now, I'm struggling?
Yeah, and I think we've touched on the biggest one from my experience with the patients I serve, which is the guilt element. You know, they feel guilty for how they're feeling, and a really common one is, for example, new dads that go through really stressful time and periods, and they do not feel like they can share the struggles they're having because they see their partner and they feel that, you know, what they're going through is far worse, and they just don't feel like they have a space. Yet the rates of postnatal depression in men are the same as they are for women. Yet there is very little support when it comes to what I can help them with, and in terms of what they can access, it's far fewer. And so I think it's so important that we allow men to feel like they can go through struggles, go through challenges, go through issues, and it's not a reflection of them. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
This isn't because you're weak or you're not resilient. No, like, resilience isn't not having any issues. Resilience is understanding how to work through those challenges and problems when they come. And so if we can sort of shift that narrative for men, that they feel able to share how they're feeling without it impacting the view of themselves and what they feel other people view of themselves, that's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks. And what I'd be really interested to understand is, because like Joe, you mentioned that you've learnt a lot now that you wish you knew when you were earlier in your career. And a lot of the time I get that from a lot of my patients further down the line. They go, oh, I wish I knew that. How can we help those younger than us coming through into these kind of roles where there's more responsibilities, etc., without having to go through those challenges? Or is it inevitable that they have to go through the hardships in order to learn those skills?
I feel there's a responsibility, especially within our environment, where it's also okay to ask if someone's okay, you know, and make sure that the people around you, we spend a long time on tour together. Even in the UK, 5 test match series, that's 25 days plus all the prep days. You spend a lot of time, and you get to know everyone really well, and you can tell when someone's not right. And actually just checking in with the guys around you and making sure your colleagues are actually in a good space, and giving them
that changed since you've been in the game? When you look back to the start of your career, was that happening then, or is it something that's kind of grown over the last years?
Yeah, I'd say it was happening, but probably not quite as frequently. I think clearly over the last last 5 or 6 years in particular, there's been a lot more, say urgency, but a lot more awareness of men's mental health, and clearly the more people that are able to talk about it and share their experiences, the more information people are going to have and understand that it's an important thing to be able to do. And I think that's one of your responsibilities within the team, is to make sure the guys surrounding you at least feel like they've got someone that they can talk to. They might not want to, and I don't think it's right to force the conversation, but at least if you can get yourself in a position where you're able to at least initiate that conversation, then you're providing a platform for someone to sort of, like you say, release the valve.
And I think friendship it's massive, isn't it?
Exactly, and we know that one of the big declines over the last 20 years is the networks that men maintain. In particular, after sort of mid-20s, we see the number of male contacts that they have per week decline significantly compared to previous decades, where there were social clubs, etc., that created that face-to-face contact. And I think it's really important. I think it's really important. And how can people find a way of engineering it back into life? I often talk to patients and encourage them to, can you find like-minded people that maybe share your passions, share your interests, that you can spend some actual time with? Even if you feel like time is really tight, just spending half an hour every week or every fortnight, it will do you good, because then when you are in those other scenarios, you'll present a better version of yourself. So it's about trying to really take control of that narrative, and healthy relationships, it's right up there in terms of tools you can use.
It really is. And I just want to talk a little bit about the dangers, the impact of when we bottle everything up. I had a really interesting conversation with a friend yesterday, and he just said to me, and I took it as a kind of compliment that he has that trust with me. And he just said, I had this moment the other day where just everything, he's got 5 kids, so he's got a busy home life, and he's got work, and we spoke about all those sort of multiple pressure fronts. And he said, I had a moment where I just kind of snapped, something happened at home, and he said, I'm driving the car because I'm heading to play golf, and I just had this moment where it just felt like every thought became catastrophic. I just want to run away from my family. I've had enough of this. He just said it was thoughts he'd never ever felt before. And he said to me yesterday, he said, I don't know what it was about. It was just so bizarre. And I said, the only thing I can think of is that over time, you know, you're coming back to what we were talking about earlier, those masks we're putting on the brave face, being the dad, being the, you know, the professional at work and all those kind of things. And if we're not seeing the impact they're having, then it kind of like a pressure cooker builds and builds. And I said, what happened to you, I think, in the car is the pressure cooker snapped, and it's always dramatic, and therefore you will catastrophize everything. What are the big downsides? If as men we decide, look, we're not in the position that the 4 of us are here. We're not particularly comfortable about being open about how we're feeling. We tend to suppress it, push it down here somewhere. If that keeps on happening, what do you tend to see being the result?
Yeah, so when someone lives with chronic stress for periods of time, it makes a lot of, unfortunately, negative impacts on both the mental and physical health. So the body's sort of stress response system is relatively kind of binary in the sense that it will detect anything that you feel as a potential threat. Maybe it's issues with work, issues with relationships, etc. And it drives the body to be in a heightened state. And that's quite useful in the short term. So like when these guys get onto the crease, and they're about to hit the ball, the body goes for a whole host of changes. The blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up, the neural firing increases, the sort of reception to potential dangers is heightened. They dampen down any other noise that is not deemed as necessary information input. But if you're having this chronically in the background, yes, it's not at that same heightened level, but that raise in heart rate, blood pressure, the sort of tension in your muscles, all those kind of elements lead to a whole host of health issues which drive metabolic health, drive increased weight, drive mental health issues. And it is a key reason why we see a lot of the long-term conditions we've got today. Chronic unmanaged stress is that. And bottling it up is the epitome of that. You are just allowing it to build up and you are just dragging it with you everywhere you go. And yes, you can go a period of time doing that. Just like if you put more and more stuff in your backpack, you'll still be able to keep moving forward, but you will not be able to react to life. So once that backpack is so heavy and something comes on that jolts your life enough to reach that threshold, like your friend was describing, you are not able to withstand it and you'll just topple over. And it kind of reaches that kind of point. It's like this threshold where you feel like you're doing all right, but then just something comes over and you go beyond that threshold and everything just falls apart. And it's really difficult. Yes, of course you can get yourself back, but it's really difficult to understand and put in place some of the key levers that you can pull to help you. And it's so much better, as Josh said, to think about how you can do those when you're actually in a better state. But yeah, no, don't pressure it up because it will only lead to one outcome, sadly. How long that takes, it varies from person to person, but it's important.
Josh, can you think of a time when you, maybe in the last few years, going before that, you reached that threshold?
Yeah, but I think in India, in the 2023 World Cup, the 50 over World Cup, I just, went really badly as a team, and as a captain, you're searching for answers as to why, and I just never got it. But I just didn't ever sort of want to talk to anyone. But I didn't talk to anyone about it, and it was actually a sports psychologist I used to use a lot. Said, "Can I reach out to you and just have a chat?" And we talked through loads of different things, and I was telling him all the problems, and he was like, "But who are you talking to about it?" And I said, "Well, no one. Like, who's helping you?" And so I just said, "Well, no one really. No one support." And so I suppose that's probably the most recent time where I can think about that. But a question I want to ask as well is, obviously it's really important to open up and talk about the struggles and things, but how do you stop that cycle of feeling like everything's just bad? So if we talk about something's bad or I'm struggling with this, and the 4 of us could sit around here and just talk about how bad everything is. does that have a negative effect, or is there a time when it's like you need to? What's the framework or process to go right? Okay, how are we going to start seeing the sunrise again? You know, like as opposed to just like compounding negative thoughts.
That is such a good point. And it's often a reason why we don't engage, because we're like, why do I want to talk about something that I have thought about, I've tried to problem solve, there's no scenario, there's no way out. I'm just going to wallow in further, low feelings. And so what I often try to say is that you want to try and increase that transparency, so at least people are aware, so they may be a little bit more lenient when you maybe don't present yourself in the best way. But you also need to speak to someone, and that someone needs to support you to actually shift that narrative. Because often we create a narrative and we really hone in, because when we are stressed, our body is designed to actually pick up more threats. So just like when you go in a stressful situation, that's normally quite useful, because if you are stressed, you want to be able to pick up any dangers. So you start to really focus in on what are the other dangers in my life, and you make them bigger. And you start to not look at the positive elements, because that isn't useful when you are under threat. So when we're talking about chronic stress, I really encourage people, when they're having these discussions with the person that's presented to them and wants to get some help, is how can you shift their perspective to start to look at even the small wins? You talked about little things that you can do to tick off, because even those little things, if you can do them, then it gives you a little bit of ego enhancement. I talk to patients and I say, look, just some of the things that we can just have on your list is making the bed when you get out of the bed. It can be just what is it that we can create on this little list of things that you're going to do? And I ask them, when the day finishes, pick one or two things that you enjoyed from that day, that you got pleasure from, that, you want to maybe do a bit more of. Because we need to shift that narrative. You're totally right. Rather than just focusing in and discussing the things that are bringing you down, to going, actually, how can I maybe get a bit more perspective? Because even in our darkest times, there are some glimmers of hope out there, and how can we increase that fire? And I think it's really important when we are maybe speaking to friends and family that are going through difficult times, we do that as well. We're not just a sounding board, but we're just helping them to shift their perspective, to see a wider picture, rather than the focus where they're just looking at the negativity.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Hey, and I just want to ask you, Joe, I'm going to come to you on this as well, Jos, in terms of when you have, when you pointed out Sachin Tendulkar, who maybe one day you'll overtake, but, we forget about all the setbacks. You look at the headlines, you look at the glorious bits. So when you've had those setbacks in your career, when you've had those failures that we're all human, you're going to have and you have had, in terms of the help that's been there for you in terms of how you deal with those and then learn from them and move on and don't allow them to affect you so badly that the form just goes completely out the window, what's been available to you?
Well, we're very fortunate that within the framework of what we do, we have psychologists and people that we can talk to within our work. But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the best and most useful conversations have been through your peers and through the guys that are living and breathing it every day with you. And there've been a number of times when, I think about periods of my career, whether it be technical or whether it be mental. There was an occasion where we were playing in an Ashes series, and I actually asked Jos to come and do some work with me at my local cricket club mid-series, where we could do some stuff together. And we ended up playing in the next test match, and we were batting in a scenario that we'd put ourselves in, and having that sort of rapport and having someone at the other end that's worked it through, the issues and the things that I wanted to get better at, having him at the other end knowing that, I wasn't in it alone, I had someone else to shoulder that with. It gave me so much more confidence to be able to. So whether it be using your peers like that, or whether it be talking to coaches who had seen me play for long periods of time and seen me at my best, seen me not, trying to remind you to stay as consistent in your behaviours and how you approach different scenarios, have all been really, really useful. But a lot of it just comes from good, honest conversations. And I look at the best lessons I've learned. It would be with Graham Thorpe, who, for 10 years was my go-to person. And when it came to batting, a lot of the best work we did was having a drink on an evening or going out for dinner and discussing it over that in a real relaxed setting, away from sort of the pressures of a cricket ground and stadiums and media cameras, whatever. It was more just a very sort of low-profile scenario where you could speak quite honestly, you could speak honestly, about how he, without any of that around. So, and then from within, a lot of the time it was, how can I bring the best version of myself as frequently as possible? What do I need to put in place if I want consistency in performance, then I'm going to have to make sure I'm as consistent as I am with my behaviours to get there. So trying to live that, and it's not easy. You know, there are days when you wake up and you feel awful, you're in a bad mood, and it's trying to find things that are routines that you can go through that can take you to a place where you're able to perform, and actually accepting that you're not going to feel perfect every day, and you're not, but there are still ways of managing through it, and knowing that over time, if you're consistent with it, then you look at anyone's career, whether it be business, sport, whatever, no one just goes like that. There's always ebbs and flows. It's how quickly can you catch yourself, and or use people around you to stop you falling off a cliff and plateauing out and try and raise back up again. And I guess trying to use those lessons within sport, away from sport, that's actually been quite helpful for me.
And Dr. Hussain, before I come to the guys on kind of practical things they do in this area, because there'll be people watching this going, we always hear about the need to talk, and it's good to talk and all that. It absolutely is. It's so important. But it's only part of the story, because if we just talk and we talk and we talk, but there's never any practical action, then in terms of us dealing with what we have to deal with, it's going to be really hard to move on, to push through whatever we're facing. I mean, personally, I knew a few years ago that really for my mental health and on a whole number of fronts, just alcohol was a bad thing for me, and it was a bad relationship, and I've taken that away. Now, that hasn't meant that everything's become easy. What it's meant is that it just makes it easier to deal with the stressful situations, doesn't take the stressful situations away. How important is it, as well as talking, that people are practical in terms of how they look after their well-being, that they take steps that are beyond just conversation?
It's vital if you want to see a shift in your mood, because talking helps in terms of opening it out and thinking about and reflecting on what are the challenges, the stresses, the things that are good, things that are bringing you down. But it's only those practical behavioural changes or lifestyle changes that are going to make a difference. And they really do make a difference. Often when you are feeling like you're in a bit of a hole, you can't see it. I remember once when I was speaking to someone and we just wanted to make one little thing. I said, why not get 10 minutes where you can just go for a walk? He was finding really significant stress at work, and it was just really bringing him down. I was like, just in the middle of the day, just to let a bit of pressure out, 10 minutes. And he was like, what's a 10-minute walk gonna do? He was like, my boss is on me, like I can't keep doing the job I'm doing, I need the money, etc. And I said, look, the 10-minute walk, that's not going to do anything to make a serious change, but it's the first chink in the armour. Okay, because if I want you to do all the things that you need to do to get to a point where you become really kind of resilient to all the various elements, we can't do that overnight. We can't do that in a week. We can't even do that in a couple of months. But we have to slowly lay down these foundations and slowly build those chinks up. And in terms of how you go about building those chinks, just focus on what is it that you feel closest to achieving, rather than trying to make heroic steps. Often we want to, change our lifestyle, our food, the kind of physical activity we do, but we want to do it overnight. And I understand why we're in a desperate position to do like a knee-jerk action, but we want to do achievable steps, because if you take something on and you struggle to maintain it, it will make things worse, because then you'll lose self-belief, you'll go deeper in, and you won't feel like there's the effect. One big trial looking at walking showed that if you did 150 minutes of walking across the week, your risk of depression was reduced by 25%.
Wow.
And if you just did half of that, 75 minutes, it's a reduction of 18%. So that's just the walking. Imagine if you did the walking and you had relationships that you could build on, and you had a diet that was more whole food, natural based, that you prioritize a little bit of sleep, that you try to, have that outlet to have discussions and awareness with those around you. You build time in to really reflect and think about what you're doing and bringing in that purpose and the reason why you're doing the things you're doing. Once you get to that point, you have built loads of little chinks of armor. That doesn't make it impregnable, but it gives you more buffer zone.
Yeah.
Because if you have more buffer zone, you're more able to pick up that, okay, actually, things are wearing a little thin at this point. I'm not at a point where I'm going to burn out, but I need to now look at what else can I do to navigate through it. But these little chink of armour, they really help.
And we all have lots of different coping strategies in all aspects of life. And we have one at home, like you guys, got young kids at home. And when we're both feeling a little bit overwhelmed, we just do the old time out thing. We'll look at each other and go, do you want a bit of, just for a minute? And you go out. And it's a practical thing, but it just lowers everything down. It turns the volume of stress down. When you're feeling, Jos, in whatever area of life it is, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, wherever it might be, and you're feeling that sense of, I just feel overwhelmed right now, what are the practical things you do to kind of turn the volume down?
Yeah, a few things. Actually, going for a walk and make sure I take nothing with me. Actually, like leave your phone behind, leave any distractions. So actually focus. So you have to listen to your thoughts. Because I think sometimes that's what I try and avoid my own. As much as I'm trying to, you might bottle it up and not share it with someone.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to escape from my own thoughts and not share it with myself. So you might distract yourself with things and do other things. So make sure I haven't got any distractions. Even another one, I would sort of set a timer on my phone for 10 minutes or say, actually do this in hotel rooms when I'm abroad, actually just lie on my bed and just like actually have to check in with how you're feeling. Because it's really easy, I find, on tour to be like watching TV or you're scrolling, just pointless stuff but you've got time to kill, whereas actually sometimes I'm doing that to just avoid what I'm actually thinking about. So
How did you find it the first time?
really difficult.
Yeah.
Really hard. Like just sort of like, oh my God, time's going so slow, like, and uncomfortable. I didn't like the thoughts I was having and sort of having.
Very different.
Actually could feel myself getting stressed doing it. But the more I did it, the more, the quicker the time goes, the more I actually found some comfort in that. And then another one sort of more cricket related would be, when you've been captain, it's like, how would I be talking to myself if I or a friend or teammate, if they were struggling and they came to me and these are the things I would tell them, what would I, flip that around and what would you talk to yourself? So, you can get very negative when you say, I'm bad at this, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't do that. Whereas if I was talking to myself, like, do you realize how good you are? Do you know you did this? Like, you've been in the form of your life here, like and so trying to like, almost have a conversation with, maybe it's me in the mirror, like talking.
Do you have those conversations out loud?
No, but I could try that maybe. But yeah, just sort of like flip that round. That's probably the question sort of earlier on about like how you then come to what am I going to use to start changing that perspective and, seeing the making your bed thing, like these simple tasks, that famous US Navy Admiral who talks about that speech about changing the world, start by making your bed. And so even sometimes writing a little list, that's another thing I'll do. Simple tasks like respond to this email, pay this bill, like do these things and just tick 3 or 4 things off a day. They kind of, I suppose, help build that motivation and sense of achievement.
And Joe, for you, when you have reached those moments of just feeling mentally overloaded, what are your kind of go-to things practically to turn the volume down?
Breathing, actually consciously trying to hear yourself breathe and control your heart rate and how you feel, trying to turn that sense of frustration and the physical, try and take that out of your body so it allows you to calm down initially. That's something I try and do when I'm playing, but also try to start to do when I've started to feel like everything's getting too much. Again, I try to just give myself a bit of quiet space so you can think. And a lot of the same things that Jos has mentioned, to be perfectly honest. But I think one thing that, just hearing what you were saying there, and both of you really, was one thing that we generally really struggle to do is prioritise ourselves and actually investing in is like improving yourself and being quite comfortable with yourself, whether you say loving yourself, like it's important to invest time in that to allow you to be a better version of yourself for the people around you.
Yeah. It's not selfish, it's the opposite, in fact.
I think exactly that. And it's such a hard thing to do. It feels uncomfortable, but I feel like if you invest time in yourself, it allows you then to make it easier to invest in the people and the people you care about around you.
Such a massive point, that, isn't it? Because ultimately with all this, you're investing in yourself to be the best version of yourself. And that is always, every single time, a blessing to those around you.
100%. I remember like the amount of conversation I have, and you know, when we're talking about some of the tools they can do, and they go, look, you know, I can't do that. You know, I've got responsibilities. I have to, you know, take the kids to this, that, etc. I don't have time for myself. You know, I need to focus on them. And you know, I tell them, you know, I say, look, it's so important that you focus on yourself, because you may be thinking of the things that you're practically doing to those around you to help, but think about the things that are passively happening, because people pick up on that. If you're going through difficult times, people pick up on that. Your kids will pick up on it. And you know, one of the things that I try to encourage them to do is, like, as you rightly said, Joe, like, if you build yourself up, you are going to present a much better version of yourself to your family, to your colleagues, and that will start to actually feed back in, okay? Because as you treat other people better, you will then get that back.
Guys, we're nearly out of time, so final question. If there's someone watching this right now and they're struggling, what would you say to them? What would be your one bit of advice?
God, pressure.
It is.
I realize it's a big question.
Yeah. I'd like to feel brave enough to share how you're feeling, I think. I also understand, I think you wouldn't be the only one feeling it. Loads of us are feeling it, and loads of us are putting on a front.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing I always thought about in cricket was, like, I played with people I thought were superhuman, and then you share a dressing room with them and they're worried about their technique and, you know, am I going to play the next game? And I thought, what do you mean, are you going to play the next game? You're the best player I've ever seen. So in the same sense, like, mentally, it's like all these people that we probably idolize and think are so strong, and they've probably got their own story that they struggle at times, and it's okay. I think the word okay is a really strong one for me. Like, it will be okay as well. Like, if you know, you can, and it's okay to share and you know, come out the other side of it.
What about you, Joe?
It's hard to follow that, really.
Yeah, that was really good.
I kind of think that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
But again, being brave enough to do something about it, as difficult as that might be, even if it's just in a small way, like I mentioned right at the start, just being able to say, I'm not okay. I just need a little bit of space, or just so people around you are aware, and just make those small moves. It doesn't have to be, and it's probably not going to be solved in the space of an hour or a day or a week. It might take it might be part of a journey, but sometimes in life the journey is the most exciting part, right? And if you embark on that and you're brave enough to take that first step, you never know where it could take you. It could open up so many new doors for you, and it could transform your life into something even better. And you could have a completely new concept of what happiness is at the end of that journey.
What about you, Dr. Hussain?
I would say that Project You is the most important role that you have got in your life, and it will affect all the other responsibilities that you have. So that needs to be the cornerstone, rather than focusing on project work, project husband, project father, whatever that may be. So think about that and focus on really, you know, solidifying that as much as possible.
Guys, thank you so much. Thanks for being open. Thanks for being honest. Thanks for being practical as well. I've absolutely no doubt that this conversation will have a real impact on those who are watching. And thank you so much for watching this. I hope it's just made you realize that, listen, it's absolutely okay to feel all of these pressures. They are all totally valid. And at times they can feel utterly overwhelming. But the good news is there's always a way through the challenges in life. It can be at times a bit of a rocky path. But the start of that path is being open like these guys have been today, just being able to express how we're feeling, finding that friend or that little support network we can trust, but then taking those steps of being practical, recognizing when we're struggling and finding ways in which we can deal with that and the things that work for us and the things that don't work for us. But as Joe's just said, you know, it is okay to not be okay. So if you're in that place right now, I hope this has been really, really helpful. I hope you've taken something from all the different bits of wisdom and honesty and vulnerability the guys have shown here. And remember, you hear this so often, but when it comes to life struggles, when it comes to things like this, you're absolutely not alone.